Hey there, everybody. How you doing? Andrew Frazier here from DogiZones. We are excited to welcome you to another Ask the DogiExperts live. I'm joined here today by one of our expert trainers here at DogiZone, George. George, good to see you. Glad to have you here.
Good to see you.
So we're excited about our topic today because it is Dog Bite Prevention Month, and we are excited to share some really helpful things for you to know, especially around those of you who have children. Those of you who have children and dogs are probably going to benefit the most from this, but many of you will get great tips out of here. So while we're waiting for a couple people to jump in here, I would love to just get an idea of how many of you have a dog and a child living in the same household. Let's see how many of our viewers actually have dogs and children in the household together. I'm just curious how many of you have dogs and kids. Nobody has dogs and kids, apparently. That's a problem. That's a problem, but that's okay. One dog. Matt has one dog, no children. That's okay.
We got 4.
You got 4.
Yeah, we got 4.
Yeah, I guess I'm the only one with a dog and a child on here. 2 kids and 2 dogs. Brenda's brave. Jessica is raising her hand. Hey, Jessica. Wish you were here with us. So we're gonna dive into this anyways, because I think it's a really important topic to discuss. There's so many bites that happen each year, and a really large portion of them end up being children. And you know, the real unfortunate part about that is that it's preventable. More often than not, if we just do a really good job of educating ourselves, educating our children, as well as our guests and other people who interact with our dogs. So I think what would be great that we just kind of start off with is maybe sharing some of the different statistics around dog bites, because I think you'll be pretty shocked to hear some of these. So there's approximately 85 million dogs here in the United States. It's about 30% of homes have at least one dog. So some of them are even more than that. And there's about 4.5 million people that are bitten by dogs each year. 45.9% of the dog bite related issues are fatality victims that are under 16 years of age. And that's based on the years of 2000 to 2018. Last year in 2020, insurance companies paid $854 million in dog bite related injuries and claims. So that's pretty crazy. And George, you've been in the game training dogs for a long time.
Yes, now. I started training dogs when the dogs were a lot harder than they are these days. You know, I mean, they were very, not much spaying and neutering, and dogs were more likely to be left to roam at large. And, so I started with, some really hardcore dogs, junkyard dogs, if you will. But there's so many more dogs now, and they are living inside the home much more than back then.
Yep.
When was the last time you saw a doghouse?
Yeah, that's
you know what I
point.
mean? So they're pretty much in the homes. You got close proximity, you got kids running around. And I like to tell people that a dog bite at its core, in most cases, is communication. It's the dog's trying to make a point. Somebody's not getting it, and dogs aren't going to explain it to you. They're going to make you stop or do. So,
yeah, and I think back over the past several years, I mean, we're a very different company today than we were 5 years ago and even 10 years ago. And I remember, probably our first 10 years in business, we always took on the most difficult dogs. We helped a lot of people who had dogs that other trainers just would not train.
No, that's my reputation was I take the ones that no one else could. So,
Yep. Whether it's dogs biting other dogs or dogs biting people or kids or whatever the case may be. And we're going to stay away from the horror stories, because I think some of the stories that we could share with people would be pretty shocking. And our goal here is not to scare people here today. Our goal here is to help educate you all and put you in a position to succeed with your dog. It's our job to be kind of the ambassadors for our dogs and to help protect our dogs from being put into situations where they're going to be at risk of feeling as if they need to bite somebody. COVID, we're not going to go into it, but COVID is only going to make the number of dog bites probably go up, in my opinion. What do you think of that?
I'm already seeing it, my evals and stuff. And most of what I'm seeing is what I call disciplinary bites. These are not full-blown attacks, but, somebody's been allowing the dog to lounge on the couch and they want the dog to move. They move the dog and the dog lets go on them to let them know that they're being rude. That's what I'm seeing a lot of lately. My biggest concerns is with the children. The kids are home. Like, my son, Bradley, he's still schooling from home, and he's there at home for periods of time with those dogs. And we only allow him access to the itty bitty one when we're not home. And, my concern is that people get too relaxed. I often tell people they should be treating their dogs around their kids and stuff kind of like it's a loaded gun. You don't leave it laying on the coffee table, you don't do that. And that'll prevent most of the problems right away.
So George, there's something that we tell a lot of our clients that I think we can share here, which is the two main reasons why dogs bite people. And, the two reasons are because they think that they can, or because they feel like they have to. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
Why does that happen? Why is it those two things?
Well, I mentioned before, any aggression is based in communication. It's how dogs communicate. It's not the only way they communicate, but it's a primary way they communicate. There are very few dogs these days that will bite someone because they think they can. That's the dog that you can train. You can do whatever you want, and given a shot, the dog will take that shot 100% of the time. That's a big problem if you have that type of dog, but I really don't see them at the levels I did back in the 70s or in the early 80s. Most dogs are going to bite because they're put in a position where they feel that's their only means of getting their point across. Whether they're mistaken or not doesn't really matter. Somebody's still bleeding or somebody's still crying. And the thing I want to say about allowing your dog to get into that position where they feel they have to bite, it doesn't matter who's at fault. The dog is going to pay 100% of the time. No one ever gets rid of the kid. If the kid steps out of line and gets bit, the dog still goes down the road or worse. So, but most dogs are biting to make something occur or something stop occurring. More times than not, it's something to stop occurring. Usually that's spatial pressure. Somebody's crowding them, trying to move them out of their bed, petting them while they're sleeping. The old saying, let sleeping dog lies, comes to mind. But the dog's trying to make something happen. If you have a dog that's continually threatening to bite, you have to really take a look at what's going on that's making that dog, for lack of better words, feel that way. It's probably something you're doing that you think is completely normal, but in the dog culture, it's in the DogiZone culture, the species culture, is completely rude and uncalled for. It's usually spatial or resources or things like that. So, having a dog, any dog, and any dog can bite. I get people all the time say, my dog would never bite. Yeah, okay, go with that.
until they feel like they have to.
That's right. Put them in a position. Any dog will bite just to defend itself.
Yep.
Your dog might bite you if you accidentally step on its foot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's instinctual. It's going to happen. So don't step on his foot. But stuff happens. You need to be prepared for that. So
100%.
Mm-hmm.
While we're kind of early on in things, if any of you know of somebody who you think can benefit from hearing about this, we'd love it if you just went ahead and shared this with your friends. You know, we'd love to really make sure that we're having an impact on reducing the number of dog bites that occur. And so if you wouldn't mind sharing, we'd greatly appreciate it. You know, something that kind of comes to mind for me here, George, is, you know, the old saying, a ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And, you know, it comes to preventing dog bites. There's a number of things that we can do.
Absolutely.
And one of those is educating ourselves about dog body language, learning to read dog body language, and making ourselves very familiar with what are the things that our dogs like, what are the things that our dogs dislike. So this way we kind of know and can kind of prepare for these types of communications that are coming from our dogs that we may just be completely ignoring right now because we're not educated on them.
Right.
You know, it goes to saying we don't know what we don't know. Well, if we don't know, we better learn it, because otherwise our dog is at risk, and our ignorance essentially puts them there. But George, is there anything, you know, kind of above and beyond that? What's one of the things that you would suggest to people about, you know, prevention?
Well,
you mentioned the loaded gun analogy earlier.
Well, let's unpack that loaded gun analogy. If you have a gun around your home, and this isn't a gun rant, you know, you can do believe what you want, but you don't leave it on the coffee table loaded and cocked. Yet a dog that's explosive at the door when people knock or come in, that's a gun that's loaded and cocked and ready to fire, and with very little bumping, it could easily go off, right? So what do? Well, you can holster that gun, meaning take physical control of the dog. Don't give him access to that bite E, the one he may bite. You should probably, if you have a dog that edgy, you probably put him away when someone's coming to visit. You know, you contain, restrain, and train. It just always comes back to the 3 pillars of management, 100%. So in my home, we just recently adopted a large male Doberman with a pronounced bite history. Took a shot at Jessica the day we went to pick him up, and he's coming around, and I still don't trust him as far as I can throw him. So right now he is contained when Jess and the boy is home. Jess can handle him. She knows what to do, obviously, but he's contained when we can't be literally on top of him for right now. And one day I'll trust him, but right now he hasn't earned that yet. It's only been about 6 weeks or so. But yeah, control. If you can't control the dog at the front door, that's where, you know, the bites occur mostly at the front door and on the couch. Most child bites occur on the sofa, believe it or not. So the dog's in repose, the dog's relaxing, kid jumps on the couch, wants to pet the dog, disturbs the dog. Well, in the dog world, that's considered extremely rude. And if you're a puppy and do it, they're going to pop on you to let you know you are being rude. Your dog's not going to distinguish between your human child and that puppy in that moment. They're acting on instinct. So
that's fair.
You know, so anyway, but controlling the dog. Okay, so our dogs are all taught place, sit, stay while we're answering the door. If we need to call them forward to make a point, easily done because we train the dog. When I have guests over the home, you may remember Teaser. She was something. Well, I always put her away. She didn't want to meet them people. And but if anybody pushed the wrong button there, that dog bites you in a minute. I think she got you once.
She did.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you know, so she was always put away whenever anybody come to the house. She's completely content. Your dog doesn't necessarily like who's coming in, so why force them to engage? You know.
That's fair. That's very fair.
Yep.
So, my suggestion would be is if you're not real familiar with dog body language, get yourself familiar with it. There's some great books. There's even some videos out there on dog body language. I'm sure you can read a bunch of things online, but we use a program here at DogiZone to train our team through a company called the Dog Gurus, and I believe that they have some great resources for professional pet care, but as well as just dog owners. And I think that may be a resource worth considering. Many of you probably may already know, my wife and I had our firstborn back in November of 2020. And we have been enjoying him now for the past 5 months without a dog bite, which we're very happy with. And we plan to keep it that way. And I know that it will stay that way because we're going to be implementing a lot of the things that, we're going to be sharing with you here today. What I thought we would do is just kind of unpack some of the things that you can do, some just very easy action steps that you can take. And we're going to kind of share these with you, just kind of, from bringing a baby home, before you bring the baby home, to when you bring the baby home, to when you have a toddler on the go, and so on and so forth. So we're going to share a whole bunch of stuff with you. And if you've got a notebook with you, you can write down all sorts of notes in there. And of course, we'd love for you guys to ask questions as we go. The more questions that you guys ask, the more we can engage with you all and provide you all better and more information on the things that you want to hear about. So let's talk a little bit about before you bring a baby home, before you even bring a child into the house, what are some of the things to do to help get your dog prepared for a massive change in their routine, their lifestyle, and pretty much everything in their life, right? So we'll kind of talk about bringing a doll into the situation here. As soon as we actually introduce a baby into the situation, we have a picture that the dog may or may not be used to. If you have a dog that's never been around kids, for example, my dogs had not really been around any infant children until we brought one home. And so one of the things that we did was we had a little baby doll that we would pick up and carry around every so often. We didn't do it a lot. And to be honest with you, we probably could have done it more. But we found that we've got pretty social dogs, so it was a little bit less of a concern. But, having that fake baby is a great way to kind of start mimicking some of the things that you would ultimately be doing. I always would encourage you to, make sure that your dog has a safe spot. Make sure they have a place that they can go to get away from the sight and the sound and the smells of a baby coming home. So whether that's a cozy corner with a bed or their crate or the bedroom, we really want to make sure that they've got a safe place that they can go and that they can retreat to in the event that they're not feeling comfortable. So George, what are some of the things that you think about and
for newborns?
Yeah.
And listen,
prior to the newborn coming home.
Yeah, prior to the newborn, we get a lot. I do a lot of evals with young couples that just discovered they're pregnant, and they're losing their mind.
Especially now, all the COVID babies, right?
Yeah, exactly. And and I really try to soothe them. I said, listen, most dog problems with the babies isn't happening on come home time. It's actually happened when that baby becomes more mobile and starts reaching for dog bones on the floor, and you get limited resource garden and puppy disciplining. But before come home, what I would tell daddy to do is, as soon as that baby and everything is settled in, mama's still in the hospital, is grab that blanket, take it on home with him, and let the dogs play with it. I don't mean play tug now, but let that dog start smelling that baby and mom, because the hormones and the baby and all that stuff is new and it's shocking to them. So that's one. If Daddy can get that home real quick and just kind of introduce the dog to that scent, that helps. Control of the dog. If you don't have training, then put that dog away. That dog should not get access to sniff that baby. You're never going to get me to agree with that unless that dog is beyond reproach in the training. Everybody wants to hear, smell the baby. Well, let me tell you, I have a news feed that comes to me every day of the dog bite incidents around the world, actually. And most dog never did it before, but the brand new baby, and that baby squeals a little bit, man, and that can turn on the what's called the predation drive in the dog, just like that. So I'm not going to let that baby sniff, or the baby sniff the dog, but vice versa, right away. I'd have the crib. I'd have the dog maybe near there, under control, contain, restrain, and train. And let him get used to hearing it. I might sit in there and I might drill the dog in the baby's room. When a baby's goo-gooing, doing all that stuff, I'm lucky, man. I haven't had to deal with that for a long time. So, but, teach that dog, hey, everything means the same in this room when that baby's crying and screaming. Means exactly the same there as it does when we're out on the training field. I'm not going to banish and punish the dog to keep them away. That's why I'm going to have an obedient dog. Place, stay there. Yeah, you're still in the room with us, man, but we're going to feed this baby. And when we put that baby up, the dog is not your baby, but is back into good graces since it's their time now. Make sure you're kind of making sure that dog doesn't start resenting things by isolation. Banishment from attention and affection in the dog world and presence is paramount to the death sentence. That's a big punisher to them. So you don't want to say, get away from the baby. It's more like place.
Right.
So that's where I'd go for the brand new come home, baby bottles and stuff. Pretty delicious, I think, as far as dogs are concerned. We don't want to give them free access to that stuff. What do babies smell like? Milk, formula, whatever.
Yep.
Dog says, hey, I had some of that. That's really good. Let me lick that baby. It ain't but a nanosecond later, you got a big problem. So that dog ain't getting in within 6 feet of my baby at the beginning. I'm telling you. So.
Yeah, I've got to say, the one thing we didn't put a big focus on here is prior to a baby coming home is making sure that you have basic obedience under your dog's belt.
Yeah.
Even if you've taken them to training classes or had them trained a couple of years ago, if you don't use it, you lose it. And if it's not something that you're regularly practicing, then it probably needs to be refreshed. And so I would encourage you, if you're going to be bringing home a new baby, get them into some obedience training. Okay. Refresh all of those things that you taught to them. So that way you're not having to start training right when the baby comes home. We don't want the dog to go all of a sudden, oh, there's a new baby here. Now there's all of these rules in place. And then we're trying to really kind of dig ourselves out of a hole. Let's be proactive. Let's get the dog's obedience squared away. So that way, when the child comes home, we're not having to introduce a whole bunch of new rules on top of bringing a new baby into the picture.
Right.
We had a question pop up here from one of our viewers, Darlene, and she had asked, is an invisible fence effective for a large dog? And I'll try to answer this one for you, Darlene. And you may have actually. I
think it's Del Reed board. Yeah, it's Del Reed.
Yes, sorry. So I'm looking from a distance here. Yep. Delreen. So yeah, you had a dog. I guess we've done two trainings with them. We've trained two dogs for her.
Yeah.
And
nice
so
lady too.
I have an invisible fence at my own house, and as some of you probably saw a few months back, we had Brian, the owner of the Montgomery County invisible fence. First off, I only recommend invisible fence brand. And I'm not going to go into that, but it's very simple. They are the creators of the product, and they have the very best technology on the market, the most reliable, the most advanced, the most adjustable, the most consistent. And so that's the only one that I can wholeheartedly recommend. I have 3 dogs that are all 40 plus pounds. on an invisible fence. Both George and I have trained hundreds, if not thousands, of dogs on invisible fences prior to being in the location that we're in here today. And some of them 150-pound dogs. An invisible fence is very effective if the dog is trained properly. What I will tell you, though, is it is just a form of containment. It is not going to prevent a dog bite. It could prevent your dog from getting into the street and biting somebody, but it's not going to stop them if somebody comes into your yard. So we don't want to look at the invisible fence as a bite prevention technique, but more look at it as a management approach that will allow us to set the dog up for success if they've got a history of chasing people on, bicycles or scooters or kids running or whatever the case may be. But we don't want to completely rely upon that. Right. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I've trained some big ornery dogs on invisible fence, and you're right as far as I'm king of the containment systems. A dog that once that person is inside that invisible fence, it's all bets are off as far as the containment system goes. And dogs are gonna. I don't like using the word protect as much as maybe some others. They own and they claim, and they will make you go away if you're getting near their stuff, which could be the house, the family, the other dog, or whatever. So if you're walking in unannounced into even an invisible fence, any fenced area, unannounced, and there's a dog present, you're a little crazy. You know what I mean? Even the little dogs will put a hole in, you trust me. But this is where I'd be outside the property. How many houses have we rolled up on where the dog's standing there at our truck, barking or eating to try to climb in? And, that's where I pick up the phone and say, hey, come get your dog. These people, a lot of these delivery people, they get bitten. They're getting out of the truck pretty confident, and there's a dog right there. And that dog doesn't know you, and they're gonna make you go away if that's what their initial emotional need is for hey, I need this guy gone. If you're not getting a message, they'll give you one. Yeah. So. And
maybe we can circle back to some suggestions for delivery drivers once we get through everything. If we have a little extra time, maybe we could talk a little bit about that, because I know we both have a little experience in helping to train other adults and how to prevent being bitten. Sure. But why don't we kind of talk about the homecoming? You started to kind of go into that a little bit, where we were talking about, the blanket and, bringing that home and allowing the dog to investigate that and smell that. Another big part of the homecoming is making sure that the dog is really in a good psychological state.
Sure.
Making sure that they've gotten the exercise, the physical exercise,
and mental too. Mentally fatigued, the dog's always going to be significantly more calm if they're mentally fatigued. How do you do that? Training, tricks, things like that. Get that dog thinking. Because if you don't guide where they're thinking, they're going to think anyway, and they might not be thinking what you hope they're thinking. So.
Yeah. So, I guess, that day one, mom should be able to come inside, greet the dog. Dad, you can stay outside with the baby. Allow mom to have that little bit of time with the dog, which is going to allow the dog to notice some of the hormonal changes and physical changes that may have taken place.
Because they do come back smaller than they left.
Yes, they do. They do. It's actually kind of funny how that works.
Yeah.
So, this just kind of breaks it down. It allows you to kind of see how the dog is reacting. You may notice that the dog is acting or behaving differently. And if they are, then, it's a caution that you should pay attention to. So if the dog's really excited, when you come in or when the baby comes in, shouldn't punish the dog for it. It's not that they've done anything wrong, but you want to get that dog focused on what you want them to do in that moment versus what they want to do. So we want to do a really good job of directing the dog with obedience. And George, on the obedience side of things, what would you say are the, maybe the two most important things for the dog to know going into a home with a baby?
If I was tied up and had to only teach two things to get that baby home, it'd be what I call a send away. Let's call it play. So get back away from a yield space and stay there. If I can only do two things. So I don't want to be get away from me. I want to say go to your place. Now, if you telling that dog go to your place and it's not, you don't have a baby problem. You got to go to your place problem. That's easy fix. You can't do it right now with the baby in your hands, but a little later, me and you are going to fix that dog. But so I get back, yield space. Space is so important to dogs. Spatial pressure, we use it all the time. I make dogs sit as a means to make a point. I can make dogs sit. I can go almost any dog out here and walk into it a certain way and have that dog sit without ever saying a word. So they get that. And in their culture, yielding space, they're not allowed to approach without invitation. If the hierarchy is in the right place, they come in when they're allowed. So I'm not gonna have a dog jumping up at this baby. Hey, get back. I'll tell you when. And then stay there, of course. Dog can't do anything wrong while staying.
No.
You can't do a thing. They can't even run off. You can just go get them.
Especially with a baby that young, the baby's not going to move over to them. So it allows you to just get the dog out of your area.
It's significantly easier. I want everybody to drive this idea home. It's significantly easier to tell a dog or teach a dog what to do than it is to get them to stop doing something. If a dog has a decision to make and you're not directing it, he's either going to do A, maybe what the dog would do, and then B, being what we'd hope he'd do. If you're not directing him, that dog almost 100% is going to do what a dog would do. So why not just tell him what to do and be done with it? So
I think to kind of wrap up the bringing the baby home side of things, make sure that you're creating as positive an experience as possible anytime that the dog is in the presence of the baby, or prior to, or during that time. We want to make things positive. We don't want to be in a position where we're having to punish the dog and get frustrated. We want to be able to have a enjoyable time. We want to keep the stress low so that the dog doesn't sense that there's a bunch of stress every time that they're in the presence of the dog, because they're going to be watching you and how do you respond to them being around the baby. And if they're seeing that you're extremely uptight, that's going to transfer right down into the dog.
Absolutely.
So, be patient. It can take time to adjust. Use your crate. Use your containment. If you don't use a crate, use the bedroom. You need to make sure that you have that safe place where you can have everything separated and you can decompress, because when you have your dog and your baby together, and especially in the very beginning, you want to be very aware of what's going on. And that high level of attention is tiring. Having to pay that level of attention, it's constant, right? You got to be watching every single thing that's going on. So let's just keep that in mind. Thinking about when they get up and start moving. My little guy is rolling around now. He's not quite crawling. He's not quite up on his feet and walking per se, but let's talk.
You notice a change in how the dogs are relating to him now?
A little bit. I think that they have been always very laid back. He's a lot more interested in them. And I've also found that they are becoming more interested in him as he's become more animated. Right. And I was telling my wife, sometime last week, I said, let's make sure that we keep an even closer eye with the dogs, because he's moving around a lot more than he ever was before. Right. And while they've been very calm and relaxed around him, we don't know. And I'm just going to kind of treat them as if they might, because I don't want to be wrong.
That's the loaded gun analogy right there. Listen, even if the dog, you got to remember, the only grasping tool your dogs have, folks, is their mouth. So even if they're trying to help raise that child, it's going to be tooth on skin. You know, like if they're trying to keep I don't know, maybe they see a snake and they're going to grab that kid with their mouth. Dogs have hide. People have skin. Dogs' bodies skin and stuff can handle that, the teeth pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to scrape and scratch and bleed a lot easier. So even if your dogs are trying to help you raise your child because they're an integral part of your family, it's still going to be teeth at some point if you're not careful. So it's usually going to be a disciplinary threat, like the kid's looking at something they've claimed on the floor, you know, their ball or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they're going to give him all the body language, probably, but he don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And if we're asleep at the wheel, that dog can react about 7 times faster than our most gifted human. So you ain't going to be fast enough. So, but it's monitor. Awareness is your friend. Mm-hmm. Don't drop the ball on that. Not with a baby.
So one of the big things that I see a lot of kids do in interactions with their dogs, and a lot of the time it's not a big deal, but we need to be aware of it anyways, because I will tell you that while some dogs allow it or tolerate these things, it doesn't mean that they always will. And if there's a time when they're not feeling well, maybe there's an injury that they're kind of hiding from us. Dogs tend to be very stoic when they're injured and not wanting to show that weakness. So making sure that kids understand that they should not be trying to hug the dog or kiss the dog or pull on the dog, whether it's their fur, their ears, their tail. All of those things are considered fairly dominant gestures to a dog, would also be considered rude. And while some dogs are extremely tolerant of it, we don't want to take that for granted, because there may be a time where your dog is not feeling their very best. So I would just encourage you to make sure that your kids understand that they should never approach a dog that way. The best way for them to approach the dogs is, first off, by talking to you, making sure that now's a good time. They should ask for permission. Teaching them to ask permission with you is the best way for them to learn to make sure that they always ask for permission when they meet a strange dog.
Yes.
And if they think that they can just immediately interact and engage with their own dog, then they may think the same way with a strange dog walking down the road when they're out on their bike and just run up to it and decide to pet it or hug it or whatever the case may be. And that's, asking for it there. Mm-hmm. So another thing would be, to really make sure that you're watching every single one of those interactions. High level of attention on your part. Don't get too comfortable too quickly. Yeah. What else would you add to that?
Well, what I'd add to that is, if you read the news articles about a given dog bite on a child, and there's dozens almost every day I read, almost every one of them says the dog never bit before. The dog never did that before. Well, they're doing it now. And, the child, that new situation puts a level of stress on the dog. Remember, they're just trying to keep in their emotional safe place. Anything that takes them out of that, anything that makes them a little weird, they're instinctually going to take some level of action to get back to that. They're always trying to get back to everything's cool. So if this is making them edgy, some dogs might go forward and use teeth, and other dogs might go hide and go find a quiet spot. If that dog can't find a quiet spot, he's kind of trapped. He's going to go forward and make that thing move so he can get to his quiet spot. So be aware, emotion drives behavior, but you can't train emotion. You can't make the dog like your baby, for instance. You can't make that dog hate your baby. But you can change what the dog does when it's in a given situation. And that goes back to what I said earlier about directing or letting that dog make the wrong decision. Don't let them do that. It's one of my mentors, Captain Haggerty, it was a very famous saying. He says, how to train a dog. Don't let them do that. You know? And he says that was 90% of most people's problems. They let the dog do that, you know? And, yeah, it's, and another thing too, at this age, we're talking here, these newborns, it's not a big a deal. But when the kids start having friends come over, those friends have dogs. The dogs love those friends, and they come in and they think all dogs are going to be like their dogs. Mm-hmm. They get a rude awakening in my house, you know, if they assume that, because I'm not raising golden retrievers anymore, you know. But so you got to be aware. It's everybody that enters your home. You're ultimately responsible. Your realm, your world, you're ultimately responsible. And most of all, you got to be that dog's steward. If he's uneasy, do him a favor, put him away. He's going to be happier. He's not going to hate you for it. You know, so keep that in mind. It's hyper awareness. I can't drive that home enough.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
So George, we probably should have planned like 2 hours.
Yeah, probably. We can go all the way up to
prevention.
teenage years.
Yeah.
So anyway,
let's just kind of fast forward here and just kind of, you know, move through some things that are going to be, you know, really important, especially with, you know, school age children, family gatherings. If you have babysitters, and then maybe we can, you know, throw something in about dogs that you run into on the job.
Yeah.
So with school age children,
yeah.
I'm just going to throw some fast things at you guys here. Teach the children how to give them food and water. Okay. Teach them how to properly interact with the dog. Okay. That can be very helpful for them starting to develop a relationship with the dog, and can be very beneficial. Create some kid zones and some dog zones in the house. One of the cool things about invisible fence is you can do invisible fence inside the house. Now, that doesn't prevent kids from going in there, especially when you have guests that come over. So if you have guests coming over, you might decide, hey, we're going to put up some baby gates as well to make sure that those kids don't end up going into the dog zone. But we want to make sure that there are some clear and separate areas.
Yep.
Teach your children what they should do if they feel uncomfortable with a dog. There's a saying that I use called be a tree, and it's pretty much just freeze up and put your arms up crossed across your chest and look up. Don't stare at the dog. Don't do anything. Don't move, and wait for help. Call for help. Children need to know how to prevent themselves from getting bitten. In the event that they fall on the ground, they need to know to kind of curl up like a rock and put your hands behind your neck and cover your neck. Yep. These are some things that we can do to better prepare our school age children. And of course, avoid the strange dogs and avoid strangers with dogs. You don't know them. They don't know you. And it's just not something that we should necessarily encourage.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about family gatherings. George, how do you handle family gatherings?
I put my dogs away.
There you go.
And listen, I always want to see my dogs perform.
Yeah.
So when I'm ready, I take them out where everybody can watch and I perform. But otherwise, they're put away because your guests are going to do stupid stuff because their dog is different. Their dog, they feed from the table. My dogs aren't allowed to approach a table or even look at it while there's food about. So, you know, but he's cute. You know, I want to go back to the school age kids real quick. Wanted to add one thing.
Yeah.
Discipline your children. Now I'm not talking about punish your children. I'm talking about discipline them. Have the rules, and you keep them at a high level of discipline on them dog rules. Because if you don't discipline them, your dog probably will. You know, and I just want to say that most kids get bitten because they're doing something they shouldn't have been doing around the dog, pulling ears, pulling tails, stealing stuff, you know, getting them adrenalized. So if the kids aren't following the rules, and in my home, the kid loses access to the dog until I decide different. I don't even say how long. I just say, you're done. So why? I take it that seriously. That's his little life. It's his face. It's his, you know. So anyway, now back to family gatherings. Yeah, your family, especially parents. Okay, let me just say this. once someone has changed your diaper, they tend not to listen to you. So, if a parent is used to spoiling their little Shih Tzu or something at home, and then you got your high-end, we got our working dogs and stuff, and they're trying to spoil those dogs the same way, they're not going to listen to you. So what should you do? Put the dog away. Or you put them away. I don't know. But you know what I mean? So, but put the dog away. He's not punished. I mean, give him something to work on. That's, usually when we're having something big, that's when I give up on the big marrow bones and stuff. I don't give them like regularly, but that's where I'd kind of hook the dog up, with a brand new big giant rawhide or something, So he's having a good, he could care less about them people upstairs making all that racket. So discipline. And don't be, the dog can come out, but maybe on a leash.
Yep.
Because remember, that's overwhelming and it's yielding space. Maybe someone's, standing too close to their favorite little binky or their food bowl. And they don't know that person. Why wouldn't they discipline? Get away from my stuff. Get away from my mom. Get away from my dad.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, and you want to keep in mind babysitters too. Babysitters, housekeepers, anybody who may be doing, work to help you with your child.
Yeah.
They need to know not to leave the dog alone.
Yeah. Not only that, I would, if I have dogs, and I always have, if I'm dealing with someone that's going to be watching my home or even my kid, I usually let Jess handle that stuff. But if they're not squared away with dogs, I'm not hiring them. You know what I mean? Even if I don't expect them to walk my dogs or anything, which I don't. But if something happens, I need someone that's cool around the dog and not going to panic and run out in the street and leave the kid there.
Yep.
So they're going to have to be squared away. I'm blessed with my daughter, Samantha. Usually if we're on out and it's a dog situation, I just have her come in. She knows the dog. She knows how to run a dog. I mean, she's my daughter. So I don't have that problem. But yeah, don't just let anybody around your dog. And pay him an extra day to come on over and hang out with the dog. Maybe the dog don't like him.
Yeah.
It's worth
good thing to figure out before
it's
you have
worth
to leave
$20, $30 to find out.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it is.
Anyway, give them their money, send them on down the road. No, my dog don't like you. You can go on. So and you can have one more thing. You can hire doggies now if you need someone to watch out after the dog. Just bring them over.
That's right. Or we'll come get them.
Yeah, we'll come get them. So okay.
Yeah. And then, lastly here, we mentioned this earlier, and unfortunately we're, pretty much out of time here. So we're going to put a bow tie on this, but I don't want to leave out all of the mailmen and delivery drivers and, just people who are faced with dogs who want to bite them at all times.
Yeah.
What can you do? And I want to just kind of share a couple of things that come to mind for me. George, I'll let you finish that up and then we'll finish off for today. But if you're a delivery driver, when you pull up, honking your horn, making some noise in the truck, doing some things that kind of lets the dog know that you're there is beneficial. You may not know if there's a dog at the house. You may not even know if there's a invisible fence there. Now, I know Invisible Fence brand puts a sign on every yard, but not every company does that. And so you may be approaching a house to drop a package and not know that there's a pet containment system there. So making some noise, right? Also, make sure that you're carrying something with you, whether it's a package, whether it's a satchel, whether it's a clipboard. I remember whenever I went to, somebody's home for the first time, I always brought either my briefcase or a clipboard with me so that if I did end up in a position where a dog was going to try to bite me, I could freeze up where I was at and I could take my object and I could put it between me and the dog, because dogs are usually going to bite what's closest to them. And I remember, several years back when I was first getting into training, doing bite prevention seminars out in Las Vegas, with the post office. And that's what we did was we, used the satchel that mail carriers used as the target for dogs to bite. And we actually let some of the mailmen, get bit by a dog in a bite suit and practice using the satchel to prevent getting bitten. So those are some of the things that I think about. Is there anything you want to add to that for the?
I have a great mailman story. When I was a kid, this is back in the 60s, my dad used to provide the local mail carrier with milk bones. The guy carried 2 bags, 2 old leather. They don't do it nowadays, but he used to carry these leather satchels, one on either side. He had 2. One was full of milk bones. My dad paid for it. Every house with a dog, that mailman delivered the mail and gave that dog a milk bone. In less than 6 months, dogs weren't chasing him away anymore. They was walking up to the fence waiting for him to drop that mail off so they could get their milk bone. True story. And it worked real well.
Funny thing is, we have a FedEx driver that comes to my place every so often, and he does that.
Yeah.
So I think there's still some people out there that practice that.
It's a smart move, man. None of those dogs. Now the bad thing is we'd get maybe a substitute mail person, and you'd hear them dogs chasing him right on over the fence,
Yep.
So, but old Tom was his name. My dad's name was Tom too, but Tom didn't have a problem.
Yeah.
The dogs line up. All German Shepherds. We had German Shepherds everywhere. Line right up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As it should be. Right?
Yeah.
Well, look, folks, we appreciate you all jumping on with us. We had a long session here this evening, but we hope you found some value in what it is that we went through. And again, we'd love it if you would share this with any friends or family members that you think can benefit of hearing some of this information. And we wish you all the very best, especially those of you who have newborns coming home. We're very excited for you and want you to have the safest experience possible.
And we're here to help. We're absolutely here to advise you. So take advantage of it.
You all have a better than great day. We'll see you all in about a month.